this meeting this evening on a cold evening, but hopefully everyone's indoors and staying warm. May I remind everyone present that this meeting will be live streamed and recorded via the internet, and this recorded archive for future viewings on the Council's website at civico.net, Vale Little Morgan. Obviously, members and officers are participating from their multiple locations. Therefore, your patience is greatly appreciated should we need to deal with any technical matters during the course of this meeting. Could all participants please ensure that they can be heard and seen on screen when actively participating in the meeting? At all of the times, participants are kindly asked to keep their visual and audio off to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. The meeting will be conducted in line with the standards set out in section 19, appendix 2 of the Council's constitution, and I kindly ask that all participants adhere to one speaker at a time. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please press their request to speak button and wait for an invitation to address from myself. Obviously, remote participants, this button is on your screen. So thank you for that. Just to advise before we start the agenda that item number 4 of the report will be taken after item number 8. Just to allow, obviously, the meeting to flow a little bit more easier, and clearly some officers can leave as when their reports are dealt with. So, item 1, part 1 of the agenda, apologies for absence.
Yeah, Chair, Councillor Drake, Councillor Goodjohn, Matthew Evans and Nigel Island. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any others anyone's aware of? No, thank you. Can we deal then with item 2 of the report, which are the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of October 2022. Clearly, these are for correctness only. So I'll quickly go through it. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, and page 12. If everyone's happy with the correctness, someone prepared to move, please. Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Someone prepared to second? Thank you, Councillor Wood. See, we're on screen. Anyone got any objections to this? No? Okay, that matter's carried unanimously. Item 3 of the report then, to receive any declaration of interest under the Council's Code of Conduct. Do we have any? No, I don't see any. Thank you for that. So as I said, we're going to move item 4 to come after item 8. So the next report is the report of the Monitoring Officer, Head of Legal and Democratic Services, whistleblowing, staff survey results and annual report. Debbie.
Lovely. Thank you very much for moving me up on the agenda. I do appreciate that. You've got before you this evening a really comprehensive report. So I thought because we've got a number of new members, it would be useful to have a copy of the current policy. So that's appended. Also, and I'm going to give this particular mention, Appendix B, I've set out a project plan, a tracker plan for the promotional work that we undertook earlier in the year, so June, and then through to the work that we did with regard to the survey. I'm giving that a particular mention because I have to say I was quite disappointed by the survey results, and I think it needs to be considered in the context of, I suppose, what we have done as an authority, how we've shared the information in the campaign, how we've shared the policy, and being mindful of the number of respondents to that survey. So Appendix B, I think, is really important so that members of the committee can appreciate that, you know, we sort of went all out on this one. So we had a campaign promoting the new Speak Out line, also the dedicated email address, also providing to each individual member of staff a copy of the policy. So it really was a sort of a thorough campaign. We also included, and I won't go through line by line, you'll be pleased to hear, but Appendix B, we also gave the new Speak Out line, the campaign, I mentioned the chief executives end of week messages, and also indeed when we went out for the survey we repeated that, so it gave it a mention, and also through that messaging gave another link to the policy. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that. So that's Appendix B. Within the report, paragraph 2.4, I've set out, I've also covered this off in the main in the executive summary, but 2.4, the whistleblowing notifications for financial year 21-22, we received one which purported to be a whistleblower notification, but on closer inspection actually it wasn't. It didn't fall within the category, and it was dealt with as a grievance. So it was progressed, but it was progressed under the correct policy. So for all intents and purposes for 21-22 we received no whistleblowing notifications. For the current financial year, it's slightly different and probably sort of leaning more towards what we would normally experience. So far through the financial year, we've had seven notifications, but again, on closer inspection, 5 of those are not strictly whistleblower notifications. But with regards to the remaining 2, investigations have been carried out. One has not been upheld, and that related to the Environment and Housing Department, and there's one which is currently under investigation, and that relates to social services. I've given a mention in paragraph 2.4 to the experience of other monitoring officers across Wales, and in fact 17 monitoring officers kindly came back to me and gave me an overview of the experience in their authorities, and within those I think there was one from a fire authority as well, and I wasn't able to secure agreement for all of that information to be released, but just to give you a flavour, of the 17 that responded, 6 of them had no notifications in 21-22. 2 had 1 notification and 2 had 2. So I mean I could go further. With regards to on the higher end of the notifications, or what appeared at first blush to be a notification, the overwhelming majority were not notifications. Again, similar to our experience for 21-22, that it didn't fall within the whistleblowing policy, but fell within the grievance procedure. So, albeit the figures do look low, it does I suppose reflect the experience across Wales. So I just wanted to put it into that context. Just moving on, paragraph 210 of the report, I set out information relating to the survey. So the survey carried out during October 2011 refers to the 323 members of staff that responded. I have to say, I think about a quarter of those, just over a quarter, were from schools, and then the statistics show that 22% of the respondents were from social services and 23 from the Resources Directorate. So I think there's a piece of work to be done to try and encourage a response from those departments that haven't responded or where we've had a low response. So 213 through to 217, actually 219, I've drawn out some of the key points which are set out in Appendix D. So that's the survey report which my colleagues in the improvement team have kindly compiled for me. It sets out within that appendix the methodology, the background, and then obviously analysing the results that we've had, and as I say, I've then pulled out some of the key points within the report. I think it's fair to say there's follow-up work that needs to be done, and I've picked that up in paragraph 220. We've got some really helpful commentary that's been provided by some of the responders within the survey. So drawing upon those responses, I'm suggesting a further awareness raising session be added to directorate and team meeting agendas across the council. Also to assist with consistency of message, that we produce an executive summary which is has been commented on within the body of the survey responses we've had. I know there was an issue with IDEV training with the module not being available. That would have been a nice quick win, but there isn't one currently available. But I have managed to secure through induction sessions for new staff joining the council that there is that in the face-to-face induction training element on whistleblowing. I'm suggesting a further mini campaign, so that's covered off within the paper, just so that we can focus on re-emphasising the protection afforded to a whistleblower and the options for reporting. So just some targeted work there. Also within the body report I'm referring to, I think we need to carry on doing the promotional work. That needs to be done on an annual basis. I think that's borne out with the survey results. And also liaising with colleagues on senior leadership team about how we can get more responses in, allocating some dedicated time for staff to actually sit down and complete these maybe at the end of a team meeting. So as I say, more work to be done there. Paragraph 222, I give a mention to the work that Ian Phillips from Audit Wales and his colleagues have done. I think it's important to say, and no doubt Ian would gladly comment on this if you wish, that a high-level piece of work has been undertaken by Audit Wales in September, October of this year, giving some assurances with regards to our policy. But it's fair to say the work was very high level, not drilling down to our processes and procedures and not analysing to sort of that degree. But what has been borne out from that piece of work is a number of areas for the policy to be amended. So I've shared that with my colleague Tracy Dickinson, Head of HR and Organisational Development, who has that responsibility with regards to reviewing the policy. And in fact, the policy is due for a review this month, so it's quite timely. So I just wanted to give that a mention. Then I've picked that up in the recommendations before you tonight. Which are that the report as a whole be noted, that the Governance and Audit Committee continue to receive annual reports in relation to promotion of the policy, whistleblowing incidents and the outcome of the planned 23-24 survey, and then to pick up the comments from Audit Wales with a view to if the committee so wishes, to refer those to Cabinet for consideration as part of the annual review of the policy. So I know that's a quick whistle-stop tour through quite a big report. But Chair, if there are any questions or points of clarification, I'm more than happy to assist.
No, thank you for that, Debbie. You know, a very comprehensive report. So thank you for that. Are there any questions, members? Councillor Hooper. You're on mute.
There you go. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Debbie, for that. Just more of a raising a thought, really, in terms of why because I agree with you, the results are pretty poor, actually, and it has a marked impact on people's willingness to want to whistleblow as well, which I think is a scary figure that came out of it. But in terms of, I'm concerned that when we need to consider what the differences of people's work environment in the current work environment as to what it was. And marketing, internal marketing, is very one-dimensional. It's screen-based. We talk about iDev, we talk about emails, we talk about things like that. And I just wonder whether we miss tricks and people are actually starting to become a bit snowblind to lots of messages. So I think this is something the council should think about more widely. And I just wonder whether it's something that's impacting on this. That would be the only, it's just a point, really, more than anything else.
Debbie?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good point. And I think certainly what I'll be suggesting is this needs to be on agendas of team meetings. So when officers are coming together to sort of build on that sort of the email messaging, to have that conversation, that discussion at a team level. I think that's going to be fundamental. So that'll be one for senior leadership team for me to raise with them and make sure that that's put on agendas.
Can I ask just quickly, Debbie, sorry, before I ask Tracy to come in, do you want a recommendation from us as a committee to say this is what should be done?
That would be really helpful. And I think, yeah, absolutely, to reinforce, and then I can take that message to senior leadership team, because I think certainly it is recognised by directors that they have that responsibility within their directorates. But if this committee could give a recommendation that it is put on agendas of directorate meetings, team meetings, and it's filtered down, that would be very much appreciated.
Yeah, as long as obviously we'll have a look at the recommendations at the end, and provided I'm not told I can't do it, then we will do it, subject to getting committee approval, obviously, but that's okay. Sorry, Tracy. Hope you don't mind me calling Tracy.
No, not at all, Councillor Chapman. It was just to come in on the point that Councillor Hooper has raised, just to say that some of the anecdotal feedback we've had is exactly that people are a bit snowblind to surveys, and that's as part of our engagement with our trade union groups on the whistleblowing policy. So we've taken, as part of this process, I've actually delivered a presentation to each of our consultative forums and our joint consultative forum, including all our direct management team meetings. The feedback from our trade union colleagues has very much been that even when they're going out with surveys, they're very much struggling to get responses back. So we do need to look at how we do things in a different way. And we have said, I held a meeting with them 2 weeks ago, and we said we'll look at alternative methods of trying to deliver messages to receive feedback, because they have also assisted us with trying to get the message across and have supported us with not only the development of the policy, but the cascading of the policy and process as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I think the issue for me is that people get consultation overload. If they're getting consultations from every officer in the council in regards to whistleblowing or customer satisfaction and whatever, people just get turned off. I don't mean that unkind, but they do, because they've got other things to do. So I think it just needs some thought as to how you deliver that in a more sort of cohesive manner. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, good evening all. I'd just like to support really what Debbie said. You know, there's been a huge amount of effort put into trying to promote this in the Vale, probably more so than in many other authorities. So it's a real effort's gone into it, but that perhaps hasn't translated into numbers of opportunity or people coming through. But I just wanted to sort of draw attention to page 412 on the survey in terms of areas that people who responded would be happy to report sort of concerns to. And to me, that gives quite a lot of confidence in terms of they were happy to comfortable report into the line manager, 65%, head of service or department, 37%, and so on, but also using the speak out line form on StaffNet, that was 30%. So I thought that was quite positive, even though we haven't had many coming through. The staff seem to would be comfortable in raising concerns, but it's getting that message over, isn't it, in amongst all the other messages that we've got to get over to staff, and it's a crowded picture in terms of all the messages that we have to get through to people. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Mark. Are there any other questions? Matthew?
Thank you, Chair. Just commenting on that table, actually, I think I agree with what Mark is saying there, but I think the thing that sticks out with me, and I appreciate I come from a different environment, but in 2/3 of people reporting whistleblowing cases into their line manager, it's probably the opposite that I'm used to seeing. Now, I don't think that's a bad thing, but I wonder if we're talking about awareness and training and that filters down to line managers, whether we are missing a trick by all of those things that are being reported there, not necessarily them being captured. Because I guess if you're reporting by the speak out line, if you're reporting by Mark's team or whatever, there's a due process. It's the comfort level. Is there a comfort level that all line managers in those individual directorates are going to be aware of the same process if that's the themes coming through? So I guess I'm speculating a little bit. I don't know the answer, but I think it's worth just sort of considering.
Did you want to comment, Debbie?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I have, underpinning all this, I have quarterly meetings with colleagues across the council to make sure that that issues which are arising, and Tracy also sits on that, so she has her ear close to the ground with the union colleagues. So we have quarterly meetings to make sure that we are capturing all of this information that's coming through. So I think I'm as confident as I could be that that matters are not being underreported insofar as notifications are not being flagged up. So you know that there is that additional, I suppose, that additional safety net there. But you know, I never like to be complacent. I think there's always more that can be done, particularly with the statistics which are before you this evening. So I think it's you know, I think we're in the space of we've got to reinforce again, don't we, and use those different techniques to reach out to colleagues.
Thank you. Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Chair. And just picking up, you mentioned statistics, Debbie, so I'm going to get one thing I would be interested to know, and this might feed into trying to help us improve, is you got the participants by service area, and I'm interested, how are they? So you've got 1% of, is it 1% resource management and safeguarding? How many people work in that area? Is it 1% of, is everyone filtered in that area, or is it'd be useful to know is participation by number of employees would be an interesting perspective to have, and it might then help us to target those parts of the business that aren't recording or don't seem to be as interested as others, perhaps, to make that more useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the piece of work that we'll be doing as part of our quarterly sort of update. I think we've got one coming up within the next few days to do that analysis to see where those particularly low returns. To be fair, I think when it's just a quarter of a directorate, you know, that's low anyway. But yeah, to drill down, that's a good point, and certainly something to bear in mind for future reports.
Okay, Matthew, again, another question.
Sorry, a very small little point, but if I don't say it, I know the policies you said is going for review this month. I'm literally just seeing an appendix to an appendix 3 of the policy. I think it's the third blue box down, talks about sufficient evidence to investigate suspected fraud. And I think we just need to be careful that whistleblowing can be a lot wider than that. So take that into account as part of the policy review. Sorry.
I'm sure that'll be taken into account. Are there any other questions? Can I just raise a few questions, Debbie? Councillor Hooper stole my thunder in regards to percentages and total numbers and that. And I think in any report, there needs to be consistency because, you know, it's statistics, damn statistics, and you can say it's 1%, but actually it means 400 people, but in another area, it could be one person. So I think it just needs some consistency. The second point is, in regards to whistleblowing, who makes the decision whether or not it is a whistleblowing matter or a grievance or you know, a disciplinary matter? Because clearly under the legislation, if it's in the public, even though disciplinary matters can be excluded outside whistleblowing, if the matter is in the public interest and actually affects lots and lots of people, and it meets the criteria in regards to the, you know, whether it breaches the law or whatever that may be, the criteria there, who makes that decision to say this is a whistleblowing matter or it isn't?
Yeah, so initially that would be via HR with assistance from colleagues in audit. So that's initially at the early stages. But the information is shared then with myself, okay, through the operational manager for customer relations, and he keeps a very detailed log for me. I don't share that obviously because of the confidentiality, but he shares step by step with regard to each matter, how it's been recorded, those which have been flagged up as a whistleblowing notification. He'll sort of give me an update on the investigation, how it's, you know, whether it's been determined to not be a whistleblowing matter, and he'll give me the details. So the ultimate sort of decision would then rest with myself being satisfied. And I suppose just to give comfort also to the committee, I'm also keen then to see, well, if it's not being dealt with under that policy, which policy is it being dealt with, and how is, and what's the end result? Has that been, you know, that concern, I suppose, albeit it's outside whistleblower, has it resulted in, you know, the concern being upheld? So it is very broad and it is logged. And
that's okay. Is there a right of appeal once a decision may be made to say, actually, I still don't agree with you?
Certainly they could do. I mean, matters which are not being dealt with through whistleblowing, going through disciplinary, they have obviously a right of appeal through that process. But I mean, certainly that hasn't come up previously, so it's a good point, Gareth. I trust you. But no, thank you, Chair. But certainly within the policy, it doesn't cater for an appeal. But I think that could be something that's factored in as part of the review.
Yeah, I only raise it on the basis that, you know, some of the other comments in the report about people willing to speak out. Clearly, if it's a whistleblowing matter, they're protected by the legislation, even though, you know, they're protected. But a lot of people still won't speak out because it all depends who they're whistleblowing about, or, you know, and I think it was raised in the report, the impact it could have on their career, etc. And I think we all understand that. But the issue is, if it's not a whistleblower matter and it's a grievance matter, there's no statutory protection for the individual and the process. So I'm just wondering, if someone says, no, I still think it's a whistleblower matter, is there a right of appeal anywhere? It's only a point, really.
Yeah.
The other issue, which again Councillor Hooper picked up, obviously there's a low turnout of 323 staff. The question I was going to pose, and again, I think it's been picked up, is 323 staff from how many staff in the council? So if it includes schools as well as the workforce of the council, I should imagine we're talking, I don't know, 4,000, 5,000 people.
Now, before I hand over to Tracy, because she has all of the figures, what I would say is not all of our schools have adopted the policy. So it's been shared with them as a recommendation they adopt it, but they haven't all adopted it. And in advance of this meeting, I have asked colleagues in education to let me know how many schools have, so that we could have that available for you. But that's a piece of work that they're collating, so they don't actually have that currently available. But with regards to setting aside staff within schools, Tracy, are you able to give the figure?
No, I can give the figure including schools, which is just under 5,500. So I'll send the breakdown through, Councillor Chapman, of those that are not within corporate. And as Debbie says, not all of our schools have adopted the process. So there will be a number of them that will have a whistleblowing procedure, but it may not be our whistleblowing procedure.
Okay, that just opened another question for me, is who checks the robustness of the policy where a school hasn't adopted the council policy? Is that a question for education rather than yourselves?
Yeah, it is a question for education, but it will be through their governance and audit process at governing body level.
Right.
So they do have very similar systems and structures from a governing body perspective, and they will have a governance committee as well, and they will be scrutinising their whistleblowing policy through there. Okay,
it would just be useful to know how many have adopted the council policy and how many hasn't. So I think, because it may be that someone just needs to do a little deep dive into those who haven't adopted it, because they may, I understand what you say, but some schools, don't adopt necessarily policies. They just don't adopt them. Debbie, I was impressed in the report that 68% of all respondents could identify all 10 key areas. Mm. That's amazing. Given the key areas that are set out in the report, that 68% could do all that. And the figures which Councillor Hooper picked up on the participants by service areas, again, I think that would be useful. It's 1% of what, because to add more power to your elbow and to ensure this policy is rolled out in the council, all those teams, 1% is quite appalling, really, in some respects. And I think that's why you need that raising of the awareness of that policy within those areas. It'd be great to get them up to, 30, 40, 50%, really, because this is, it's fundamental, really, to protecting this authority. So I think we'll certainly assist you where we can and if we can. Okay, that's that. Are there any comments? No comments? Okay, if we go to, Mark.
Not strictly a comment, it's more of just to give some assurance to Matt Evans's question earlier around just much wider than fraud in terms of the areas that can be reported. So it's in the policy on page 7 of the policy or page 390 of the pack, just to give some assurance on that. It just set out a range of things that can be reported, but it also sets out that it doesn't replace the sort of safeguarding avenues and other relevant things as well, because if it's a safeguarding matter, it may be a whistleblowing, but it has to be dealt with then the safeguarding procedures. So it's quite complex, really. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mark. If there are no other comments, we go to recommendations. The first one is obviously to note the contents of the report. Secondly is that we continue to receive annual reports in relation to promotion of the policy, whistleblowing incidents reported and the outcome of the planned 23-24 survey. That we as a committee note and endorse the proposed areas for revision of the existing policy, obviously picking up what Matthew said as detailed in paragraph 2.22 of the report, and refer the same to Cabinet for consideration as part of the annual review of policy. And I think if we have a recommendation for that the Chief Executive be requested to ensure that whistleblowing is placed on all Directorate agenda meetings, heads of service meetings and team meetings. Would that suffice, Debbie? Would that give you some comfort?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you very much. Really helpful.
Okay, there are 4 recommendations then. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have someone prepared to second? Thank you, Matthew. Anyone against? Chair show. No, those are carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Debbie, for your input. I don't know whether Tracy's leaving as well or whether she's staying, but thank you very much for the input.
Thank you very much.
And Merry Christmas.
Have a good meeting. Oh, and to you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, next item on the agenda is the report of the Director of Corporate Resources, Audit Wales, Verrell Morgan Council Assurance and Risk Assessment, ARA Review 21-22, and the Auditor General for Wales National Study Report on Public Sector Carbon Readiness for Net Zero by 2030. Tom.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. We're joined by Ian Phillips from Audit Wales, and I think Ian's going to introduce the initial part of the report, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yeah, no, that's lovely.
Great, thanks, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yes, our report's a summary of some key parts of the assurance and risk assessment we did in the 21-22 audit year. We do such work across all councils in Wales, so all councils have either had or will be getting a similar report to this one. It focuses on 3 areas, which is financial position, the implications of the Local Government and Elections Act 2021, and the council's carbon reduction plans. For information as well, at Appendix 1, we've included a letter we wrote in March this year about the application of the Sustainable Development Principle in the leisure contract extension. We raised some concerns with the council about this initially, but were subsequently assured by the council's response to those concerns. But we've included it as an appendix because, and we say this in the letter itself, we feel it's important that members are cited to this so that they can help take ownership in driving the council's application of the Sustainable Development Principle. And I should also point out that we're currently in the middle of a project at the council that is looking at the application of the Sustainable Development Principle in service areas, and we'll report on that in due course. So going back to the main body of our report, with regard to the financial position work, it's worth noting that we concluded this work in July this year. Obviously, as you know, a lot's happened in recent months. Councils are facing increasing financial pressures, but this was our view at this particular point in time. Our main message is the council remains well placed to maintain its financial resilience, has increased its usable reserves, but needs to determine how it will meet its budget gap over the medium term. We note that the council's usable reserves increased significantly in 21-22. We also note that the council has a mixed track record of delivering its savings targets, and although the council achieved its significantly reduced target of 247,000 in 2021, there was a shortfall of 120,000 against its £500,000 target in 21-22. And our report also draws people's attention to a financial sustainability data tool that is available on our website, and that includes a range of local government comparative financial data. We also took a high-level look at the arrangements that the council was putting in place to respond to the Local Government and Elections Act 2021. The report touches on some of the key additional duties that Act brought in and how the council was taking forward its arrangements in this regard. Those duties include the council's self-assessment, public participation strategy, and the setup of this Governance and Audit Committee. And overall, we are assured about the actions the council has taken and plans to take to meet the requirements of the 2021 Act. And then the final section of the report is on the council's carbon reduction plans. So we did local work at all 22 councils in Wales that was complementary to our July 2022 national report, which we published on the public sector's readiness for net zero by 2030, which is part of this agenda item as well. The national report includes 5 calls for action from public sector bodies. I'll briefly go through those. That's strengthen leadership and demonstrate collective responsibility through effective collaboration, clarify strategic direction and increase the pace of implementation, get to grips with the finances needed, know your skills gaps and increase your capacity, and improve data quality and monitoring to support decision making. So with regard to the Vale of Glamorgan Council specifically, our main finding was that the council is taking forward its plans to meet the challenge of achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2030, but recognises that further work is needed in terms of resourcing its plans. The council has a clear vision of what it wants to achieve, and it's initiated Project Zero as a response to that, and it has a climate change challenge plan 2021 to 2030. Council is funding some additional staff resource in 22-23, and there has earmarked reserves related to Project Zero. Council recognises further work to leverage additional funding will be required, and we made one recommendation as a result of this work, and I think all councils in Wales have been given the same or a similar recommendation. That's in order to meet its net zero ambition, the council needs to fully cost its action plan and ensure that it is aligned with its medium-term financial plan. We also recognise other positives in the current arrangements, such as a strong focus on partnership working in the challenge plan, and the fact that there are established governance arrangements in place to oversee the Project Zero agenda. So that's an overview of our assurance and risk assessment report, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Also, if there are any questions on the national report on public sector readiness for net zero carbon by 2030, then I'll answer them if I can, but I may need to take queries back to the core team that did that work, which I wasn't part of, but I'll take any queries back if necessary and make sure you get a response as soon as possible. So thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Is there anything, Tom, you wanted to add, or you're happy with that?
Just briefly, to say that we absolutely welcome the work that colleagues at Audit Wales are doing with us around the Sustainable Development Principle, and specifically in relation to the leisure contract and arrangements there. The report is going to Healthy Living and Social Care Committee in January, providing the latest update, and that will pick up some of the findings there. And just drawing your attention, Chair and Committee, to para 2.7 of the report, where we talk about, paragraph 2.6 of the report, where we talk about the council's response to that recommendation made by Audit Wales, that work is underway now to cost the individual delivery schemes within Project Zero, as well as developing the data and insight that we need to understand the overall financial cost of delivering Project Zero. You'll see, as part of the developing budget proposals for next year and the annual delivery plan, that Project Zero remains one of the critical challenges for the organisation. So consideration is being given as part of that medium-term financial planning process to how do we cost and then deliver on the Project Zero commitments.
Thank you for that, Tom. Okay, questions, Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks both for the report. I'm just interested, we talk about costings quite a lot for net zero, but one of the things I think I would have expected to see here is more about where we are in terms of the politics. And I don't mean politics with a big P, I mean politics with a little p, in terms of trying to encourage people that this will be a straightforward change. This is going to cause quite a lot of people quite a lot of pain. It's going to be a complete change to people's lifestyles if we're going to get to show the leadership we need to. And I use an example. I had a piece of casework where we were talking about turning a car park into a community orchard, perhaps. And the response from officers, well, we need to make sure we have enough car parking spaces. If we're serious, truly serious about getting to net zero, these are the challenges that we need to do. And these are the small scale politics that we need to get into. And I'm just surprised that didn't come out more, because I think we're missing the problem you know, this requires bravery from people within the council, it requires bravery from the politicians to support officers, to make sure they know that the people who've been elected have got their back. And it feels like it's missing. I'd welcome some thoughts on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Trooper. Who wants to deal with that? Tom or?
Okay, I can certainly try, Councillor, but I think the national study that Audit Wales have done gives some useful indications there about how absolutely that point around leadership, around community leadership, but also leadership internally, and change is really all encompassing. The thing with Project Zero, certainly, or our net zero plans through Project Zero, are that they are not just technical decarbonisation and energy reduction efforts. They talk, the first set of challenges around leadership and behaviour changes is up and centre in terms of those plans. As always, it's part of a balance of decision making when we're taking those decisions. But absolutely, it's really important that we do understand how we're all going to collectively have to change how we operate and the decisions that we need to make if we're going to meet those challenges.
Is that okay, Councillor Hooper?
We could go on and on.
Yes,
and on.
I know. Are there any other questions? Ian, can I just ask you a question?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know whether Matthew was coming in then. Given the current environment which every council's working in with regards to its financial capability and ability, and maybe this would have been better after the budget settlement was announced on Wednesday, is that there are so many reports coming out from Audit Wales in regards to, this one's one, the call for action, get the grips with your finances, number one, number 3 bullet point, clarify your strategic direction. Every council within Wales, and most probably nationally, is going to become financially constrained if their budget settlement isn't very good this year, and if that goes on, some councils are announcing, I've seen the press, 9.4% increase in council tax, plus slashing and burning some of the services they deliver. There needs to be some recognition, I think, by the regulators that councils aren't going to be able to deliver all of this within a specific timetable, because their money is going to be stretched. Social care is a huge issue. Education is always a big issue. This carbon reduction matter, whilst they can control a lot of their own estate, etc. Schools are in the mix as well. And again, we know the governing bodies have got their own issues around that. And I think, is there sort of any discussion in the audit teams to say, actually, we may need to take our foot off the throttle here, because there are so many priorities coming out within Welsh Government, and there's, and again, with all due respect, the regulators, they're trying to look after the best interest of that. But is there going to be any sort of latitude to say, you're going to be given a bit more time, because 2030 is only 7 years away? And, I think there's going to be a car crash at some stage. That's my own view here. There are so many priorities. There are so many balls going to be juggled in the air that at some stage someone's going to drop a couple of them. So it's whether there is a recognition from the regulators that there are really serious issues, and someone actually needs to prioritise what are the real priorities and what can be sort of left to one side just in the interim until money becomes a bit more available.
No, I think it's a fair challenge and an interesting point, particularly in the current financial position. I think I don't want to. It's not our area to sort of dictate policy or have any influence over policy. The fact was, there's this drive towards 2030, and really this was a baseline look at it, really, both nationally and at councils. It wasn't something we looked at before, We do intend to look at it again because it you know, as Tom mentioned, it's seen as a critical issue in the sector. But I do take on board the comments about the financial pressures, and ultimately the council has to prioritise what it spends its money on, what its key challenges are. So it wasn't really designed to put the foot on the throttle as such. It was more where are councils at now in terms of taking forward their plans. And even in the time since that work was done, things have escalated. So that report came out in July, the national report, and things have escalated in the intervening months in terms of, you know, the impact on council finances. So I think we will take the wider picture into account, you know, in different further rounds of carbon reduction work. But, you know, in terms of where the policy direction goes, that wouldn't be a role for us. But we would be looking at how that is, how councils are executing sort of their ambition in terms of getting to there.
Okay, it's not a question for you know. I'm looking at it from a general overall picture here in regards to finances of a council. You know, carbon reduction is just one small part of what they have to deliver. It's just, you know, for me, it's just the issue of, and, you know, I'm sure many people on the screen are aware, once the regulators make a recommendation, you know, they come down on you like a ton of hot bricks if you don't deliver it. But the reality is there are so many other priorities given the financial constraints is whether the Auditor General has actually had that discussion with all his teams and said, you know, we'd actually need to give a little bit more relaxation here because they're not going to be able to deliver everything because money is going to be, well, I don't know what it's going to be because I don't know what the settlement's going to be, but it is going to be extremely tight. And as you say, you know, if the council came out and said, right, look, we're not going to do anything about carbon reduction, we're going to put all our money in social care and education, there would be absolute uproar. But and again, that's a balance, as Councillor Hooper says, the politicians have to take. But I think sometimes there does need to just be some calm into the waters, really, to say, look, we understand the financial position we're in. Yes, we've got a job to do, but we understand where you're at.
Yeah, in recent years, we've done a succession of financial sustainability reviews. Sort of, that was really the tail end of austerity part one, if you like, and where councils were. And then obviously the pandemic hit, and we tried to be sensitive to the needs of councils at that point. We paused work. We started to have a different relationship in terms of engagement, I think. And in many ways that's continued, you know, and then obviously, you know, that the current situation is hit and we look like we're going. So we are acutely conscious of the difficulties, the competing financial demands, but we have to pick topic areas and explore how arrangements are to you know, are working, you know, to achieve those goals. But you know, personally, I think, you know, we are conscious and do you know, give due regard to the competing financial difficulties in the increasingly difficult financial position.
Okay, thank you. There's no criticism of you, Ian. You work in an environment which is extremely difficult. So thank you for that. Councillor Prothero.
Yeah, I was going to come back on the recommendations from the audit report, which, first of all, I think Councillor Hooper's already said, this comes really down to leadership. Yes, we do have a huge black hole with our finances, but 2030, as Ian has just said, that date is there. Basically, you know, climate change isn't going to wait for our economic situation to improve. It really has nothing to do with this. And the leadership and the decisions that we make, it comes down to every single individual in the authority, but it's got to come to changing behaviours as much as what we spend and how we spend it. And for me, I think if we make any recommendations, it's how we are ever going to, or how Audit is actually ever going to measure how we're doing. You know, how would you know? This is such a difficult thing. There's lots of good work going on in this authority, projects here, you know, different things happening over there. But so far, and this is something that I think has eluded us and many, many others, how are we measuring this? How are we capturing the data? How are we benchmarking this? When are we going to know if we get there? Will we ever know that we're going to get there? Everybody's in the same boat. But it is I don't know if it's the elephant in the room, but it's just something that really we should start talking about, I think. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Prothero. Tom, is that a question for you for response?
Yes, thank you.
Is it a question? Sorry, Tom.
I think it was.
In terms of how are we going to know if we've got their question, Welsh Government over the last couple of years have been running a data collection exercise annually. I think they accept that it's not a precise science as yet, and they're honing the way that they're measuring and recording that information. And I'm looking at how we can provide that information to elected members as well, to show the kind of direction of travel in terms of our emissions. It's relatively straightforward in terms of our direct emissions, because we've got really good recording in terms of energy, of the utilisation of our fleet, and how our staff operate, for example. But as you alluded to, the behaviour change in how we purchase goods and services, that's where the vast majority of our carbon emissions exist. So at the moment, the Welsh Government framework almost uses kind of proxy indicators for the amount of emissions that are generated through certain activities like domiciliary care, for example. And what we're looking at now is what our data return to Welsh Government this year is telling us in terms of where that carbon is, and then exploring with senior officers throughout the organisation about ways that you can decarbonise those activities. So how can we take carbon out of domiciliary care provision? When we're buying goods and services, how do we look at the supply chain and the social value associated with buying more locally, for example? And I think over time, us changing our behaviour and how we do those things, and the Welsh Government way of capturing and reporting that becoming more sophisticated, should give us a more timely kind of indication of how we are doing in terms of that progress towards net zero.
Yes, it's if you look at the circular economy, that's a very good place to start, because if your outcomes are there will be no waste at the end of it, and you go right back to almost the commissioning stage, so before it even hits procurement, it's well, what are we trying to do here, rather than I just want that and I just need that. And it does involve every single person in the authority, not even just it's a procurement function, because it isn't, is it?
No, absolutely. And the procurement strategy that Head of Finance will be taking through corporate performance and resources and Cabinet after Christmas very much picks up on those issues, so that it's designed right into the process at the very beginning before we even go out to procure.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Councillor Prothero. Are there any other questions? No. Any comments? No. See the recommendations which are contained in the report. Governance and audit, note the contents of the report. The Council Assurance and Risk Assessment Review 2021 and refer the report to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, with any recommendation comments of the committee referred to Cabinet thereafter. And number 2, the Governance Audit Committee review the contents of the appended Public Sector Readiness for Net Zero Carbon by 2030 National Report and the Council's response, and upon consideration to refer the report to Environmental and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee, Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, with any recommendation, comment referred to Cabinet thereafter for consideration and endorsement of the proposed actions to address the recommendations in the national study. Clearly, Tom set out in paragraph 2.6, I think the response to the recommendation, whilst it's not really, it's saying, look, there's further work to be done here in regards to funding of this project. Obviously, we'll take that on board in regards to the recommendation, I think, referring to paragraph 2.6. Unless there are any other proposed amendments or changes, someone prepared to move the recommendations, please? Councillor Hooper, thank you. Someone prepared second? Thank you, Matthew. Anyone against these recommendations, please show. No, thank you. That's carried unanimously. Ian, thank you very much for the presentation of the report. Extremely grateful for you going through that, and certainly ably assisted by Tom. Thank you very much. You're quite welcome to stay, I'm sure, and listen how the rest is going. But thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers.
Okay, the next item is the report to the head of the Regional Internal Audit Service. Firstly, the Governance and Audit Committee self-assessment of knowledge and skills. Mark?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, the purpose of the report is to set up the self-assessment questionnaire feedback provided by Governance and Audit Committee members to inform the development of a learning and development plan for the committee. So if I just go through the key points in the report, there's 2 recommendations there, but the principal one really is to get members' feedback on the results really, and how the committee wants to take things forward. Key issues for consideration in paragraph 2.1, the Governance and Audit Committee members were requested to consider 10 statements and to indicate whether their level of knowledge and experience was either good, satisfactory or little knowledge in relation to each of them. The question is attached Appendix A for reference. It was a little while ago now that we issued the questionnaire back, I think it was early September. And the responses from the 8 return questionnaires are at Appendix B. Is a bit of an analysis there at Appendix B and have been summarised below. So section 2.3 or paragraph 2.3 of the report, 89% of responses from members of the committee indicated their level of knowledge and experience was reasonable. The areas where little knowledge was indicated as highest were Statement 10, which is about complaints handling, Statement 9, council performance self-assessment. There were 3 statements where all 8 members indicated they had good or satisfactory knowledge. These were Governance and Audit Committee role and functions, internal audit, external audit and risk management. And then there were 4 statements where 1 member of the committee indicated they had little knowledge or experience, and these areas were organisational knowledge, financial management and accounting, counter fraud and values of good governance. So you can see there, paragraph 2.6, members of the committee were also asked to provide an indication of other areas of expertise that they may possess. So you can see that in table 1 there in terms of additional areas of expertise that individual members may have. And there was an additional comment from 1 member about being SIP's qualified procurement specialist. So based on that, we've set out under paragraph 2.8 was that half a dozen bullet points in terms of potential areas based on the analysis of the questionnaires returned at that time. Obviously, in relation to council performance self-assessment, I think 2 reports have come to the committee since then. So the likelihood is I would have thought members would be far more aware now than they were at the time of completing the questionnaire, for example. And other reports have been covered in relation to counter fraud to some extent and some other aspects. So really, he was trying to get a sense from the members in terms of specific areas they wanted to pinpoint in terms of developing a learning development programme if they felt that would be useful. So I think I'll pause there, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Are there any questions? No questions? Mark, just a question for me in regards to the areas that are highlighted in point 2.8 there. There are, what, 6 bullet points. How long a session would you consider is required for each of those matters, or could they all be dealt with in a half a day to give a general overview, or a day? Because again, you know, I'm sure you could run a day session or a 2-day session on each of them going forward. It's just having that general overview, I would have thought, that members require. And can that be done sort of in a half a day or sort of 2 half days or something?
There's obviously different ways of doing it. One of the things we've done in another authority is to tag a session on at the start of an already existing planned committee, as long as the agenda obviously isn't too long, because they can obviously be quite lengthy. But maybe put a half-an-hour session at the start of certain scheduled meetings, because the other thing is availability and trying to get people together and so on. So that's what I would probably suggest from a point of view of making it digestible and deliverable. But, you know, I was going to say as well, complaints handling, there will be a report coming to a future committee on complaints handling, so that may not be as necessary. So there's the delivery, but it's also the topic areas, I suppose, would value some feedback on, really.
Okay. Has anyone got any questions or any comment on it? No, nothing. Mark, I think. Oh, Matthew.
Sorry, not quick enough to put my hand up. I guess I'm probably saying something really simple here, Mark, but it probably makes sense that, given that I think the survey, the results said we were a bit weaker in complaints handling and that performance self-assessment. Completely agree with the point. We've probably upskilled in performance self-assessment to this point, but complaint handling is probably seems like a priority one, and famous last words, but probably not the hardest one to cover off. But that probably, if you're targeting one, that probably seems like, certainly from my personal perspective, that would probably be a good one.
I was going to suggest, Chair, that report will need to come fairly soon anyway. Maybe for members to receive that report, I think that will explain quite a lot, and then see if there's anything additional required in relation to that topic after that item has been presented. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, okay, that's great. I think maybe with, as you said, with the others, Mark, you know, and I know 2.9 said that you're looking at drafting a plan, is whether or not when you're drafting that could say, you know, I think a good suggestion, maybe half an hour before the start of the meeting, just a quick update session, and then we go into the meeting. At least members are available, hopefully, for that evening. I know they're very busy people, but clearly that, you know, half hour before the meeting should give some sort of insight into those areas.
Because I was going to say, when we did the induction session in the summer, we covered most, if not all, of the key areas at that point. I think we've got quite a lot of members who are quite well skilled and experienced already. So it's not as if we're starting from a low base. In some places, we're starting from a different situation. So, so I think unless people, you know, point out some key areas, complaints possibly, but I think let's see how that report when that comes forward. Treasury management, I think there is a plan to do something else on treasury management as well. I know we got an item later on about information security and IT governance and so on. So that's coming up, which wasn't even specifically on the questionnaire from memory. So it's not as if things haven't been brought forward already. So so maybe, based on the response, it'd be more a case of seeing it as if anything comes out of the woodwork as we go through, and obviously members can flag it up at the appropriate time. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. If there are no other questions or any comments on this matter, the recommendations are there. That obviously we reviewed the questionnaires and information. Certainly we discussed and confirmed the learning development areas required, which are obviously set out in paragraph 2.8. And recommendation 2 is officers draft a learning development plan reflecting the views of the committee. Only question is, by when, Mark? By the next committee?
I suppose what I'm saying is, do you actually need a plan as such? That's the thing. At this, I'm not sure whether we do formally based on the response.
No,
so I'm wondering actually.
Yeah. Well, do we need to take recommendation 2 out?
Yeah.
If they're not going to do a plan, then you know, we just pick them up as and when we come along.
Yeah.
We'll take recommendation 2 out. Are members happy with that? Okay. So recommendation 1 there, we've obviously given you some feedback. Someone prepared to move recommendation 1, please? Thank you, Matthew. Someone prepared to second? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Anyone against? No, thank you, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Updated forward work programme. Mark, is that you? Or, oh, Joan.
That's me, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Hello, for the tape, I'm Joan Davis, Deputy Head of the Regional Internal Audit Service. So agenda item 8 is the updated forward work programme for the committee, a report that the committee is well used to receiving. The table at 2.3 lists the items due to the next meeting on the 27th of February, and Appendix A provides a detailed timetable for you. I'd just like to point out to the members of this committee that the governance and audit self-assessment has been moved to April 2023. It was timetabled to come more sooner than that. However, there has been a recently published for guidance, and by pushing it back to April will give us time to go through the checklist, take in the additional requirements from a Welsh perspective, and then undertake the exercise. In addition to that, an additional meeting may be required in January 2023, as last time when it was reported, the audited statement of accounts and the annual governance statement are still outstanding. So if that happens, we may have to put another meeting in January specifically for that. That's all I'd like to say on that then, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Joan. Any questions, anyone? Councillor Hooper?
Thanks for that, Joan. I'm just welcome your view. It seems to be some quite hefty things to be reading for that February. You know, Treasury Management Strategy feels like it's going to be a big document. Lessons from the accounts could be a big document as well. You know, are we going to be able to get this through, or are things that we could perhaps get access to a bit earlier in this agenda? I don't know. I think the Treasury Management Strategy, for example, is it close to being ready? Is it something we could have sooner? It just feels big. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
If I answer, the Treasury Management Strategy is something that Gemma does it from accountancy. So, or Matt's here. Matt might be able to help you on that one.
Yeah, we've only just done the half-year Treasury Strategy to Cabinet that goes on to council and scrutiny are currently having a look at in this cycle. We're obviously doing the work on the strategy going forward at the moment, and that will come forward to this committee and then on to Cabinet in February before it goes on to council. So that it's on quite a tight timeline, and that genuinely is the earliest we can bring it to you, unfortunately. I think like a few, I'd like to spread some of these budget items out, but they do all naturally hang together very much, and you know, the capital programme, the budget, and the treasury management all very much interlinked and need to be developed together.
Head down, backside up.
Yeah, correct.
Democrat, was that you, Gareth?
That is me, Chair. Can I just come in just quickly say that we will have a briefing session before the February meeting on the Treasury Management update. So
Okay,
members have an opportunity to have a quick insight before they go into committee meeting. So that Gemma Jones has requested that. So I'll send an invite out tomorrow, Chair.
Thanks,
yeah,
Gareth.
and we'll have our external Treasury advisors along at that as well, and they typically do a very good job for us.
Anyone else got any questions? No. Can I just pick up what Councillor Hooper says? I think what we can't do as a governance and audit committee is to be rushed into these things. And I think, you know, for us to give credit to and justice to these reports, we do need ample time to prepare and read the reports. And whilst I understand the council processes, is that, you know, we shouldn't be at the end of the sausage machine where everyone's going to be rush and get this sorted. So I think sometimes there may just need to be some extra time-ins, and, you know, it's great that we're going to have a session on treasury management, but it may be that we sort of delay determination of the matter for a week or so everyone can take them in, the papers in, because again, it's not only the treasury management strategy. We've got the financial management code, we've got accounting policies, lessons learned from the accounts. That's making the assumption, I assume, that the accounts are being signed off in January, because you can't learn any lessons until you actually sign them off. So we don't know when that's going to be signed off, and perhaps Matt could give us some indication if it is going to be January, or is that time going to drift again? So I think we just need to be mindful that we're not going to be rushed into some of these things. You know, rushing into them doesn't necessarily make good decision making. So just to bear that in mind. Matt, did you want to comment on the accounts?
Yeah, I think the accounts is still fluid still, and some of it is down to the resources from our Audit Wales colleagues as well. But most importantly, the lateness in the final guidance on accounting for the infrastructure assets. We are going to have to very likely have an additional audit governance and audit committee to agree those, but certainly later in January, I would imagine.
Okay. Yeah, obviously, we can keep a watching brief on that, and
yeah,
that's okay. Any other questions? Any comments? No, you see the recommendations then that we note the forward work programme and we endorse a schedule of items for the next meeting on the 27th of February 2023. Everyone happy with that? And obviously it says indicate with any additional information required. We'll pick up that that briefing session beforehand, I'm sure, on Treasury Management. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Seconder? Thank you, Matthew. Anyone against? No. Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Item 4 now, which is going to be brought forward, is the report of the Chief Executive on the Corporate Risk Register Q2 update. Matt?
This one's me, Chair.
Oh, sorry, Tom.
That's quite all right. I didn't want to frighten Matt into thinking he was presenting it. So this is the Q2 Risk Register report. Committee will reflect on the workshop that we had with Governance and Audit Committee members a couple of months ago. We've tried to take on board the feedback with consolidating the information into Annex A so that you've got the most salient points in terms of movement on the risks. Annex B, which is the very detailed register itself, is provided purely for information and your assurance in how we've reached the conclusions that we summarise in Annex A. At the previous meeting, Chair, your committee were content to remove the WICIS risk, so that has now been removed, but we've kept in the deprivation of liberty safeguards at your request to keep a watching brief on that in the coming months. And you'll also note that following your approval, that the welfare reform risk has been redesignated as cost of living. So we continue to do some work internally in terms of how this is presented, and we'll be bringing updates in due course to your committee, Chair. So drawing on the report itself, there are 17 corporate risks on the register. 5 have scored a high status, 3 at medium high, 8 risks congregate around medium, and 1 risk scored medium low on the register. One of the recommendations on the report for your committee this evening, Chair, is that we reframe the reshaping risk as a financial fragility risk. This plays into some of the conversation that we were having in the earlier item with Ian from Audit Wales, and that's articulating the organisation's vulnerability to a financial position as a result of the emerging economic situation. We've defined that risk as the inability to maintain a balanced budget and deliver our key savings targets to address the financial challenges that lie ahead, and we've allocated that indicatively a high or 12 risk status on the register. The Annex B draws on some of the information that we presented to the Council's Cabinet and Scrutiny Committees in a report in October. So it reflects the medium-term financial plans refresh and the revenue budget setting process for the coming year. It details some of the emerging financial pressures on the Council's budgets and some of the likely funding scenarios. As you said, the Welsh Government budget tomorrow and the settlement on Wednesday will be a critical piece of information this week. But the risk as it's presented to you this evening describes some of the process that the Council has been going through really detailed work in preparing for this week's announcement, and that will then be wrapped up in a report to the Council's Cabinet on January the 19th, which will set out proposals for how we intend to balance the budget for the coming year. In terms of the overall risks, there's not been any movement in risk statuses during the second quarter of the year, and in terms of direction of travel, they've maintained a static position over the period. In terms of forecast direction of travel, though, we do anticipate that the legislative change and local government reform risk, as well as the integrated health and social care risks, will diminish over time. You heard from Ian in terms of our preparation around the Local Government and Elections Act earlier. Many of those duties are now in force or will be coming into force very shortly. However, the newly redefined financial fragility risk, the risk around Project Zero, information security, which we'll cover as part 2, market fragility and demand management risks are all forecast to escalate over time. And there's some commentary in Annex A rather, setting out the reason for that. We have got a detailed update on information security as requested by your committee chair at our last meeting, and we'll be discussing that, as I say, as part 2 of the agenda this evening. As Audit Committee members will know, we track the actions that are associated with mitigating these risks. There are 329 actions being tracked across the register. We've been able to assign a RAG status to 318 of those, and at the end of the quarter, 294 or 92.4% of the actions were on track or completed. 16 though were allocated a red status, that's 5% of the actions, and those exceptions are included in a table within Annex A, so you can see some detailed commentary as to the reason why those things have slipped. So that's an overview, Chair, and obviously happy to take any questions. Just to draw your attention as well, there's a typo in recommendation 1. It should read that committee recommended to note the quarter 2 position April to September, not April to July.
Thank you for that, Tom. Okay, are there any questions? No questions? Any comments? Oh, easy one for you, Tom. Can I just make a comment? Clearly, members have got a copy of this on the screen, which consists of nearly 338 pages in this report. Is whether there is any opportunity for you, Tom, rather than produce the whole document, is to produce a short report by exception. So, you know, you've got loads of these risks which are, you know, green. So do we need to know about the green ones if everything's okay? But the red ones which are slipped, then clearly those are the ones really we should be focusing on. So rather than have 338 pages, should we just have sort of 30 pages or 20 pages or whatever it is? Because then it would save enormous amount of time. You know, most probably you just push a button and it gets printed off. But you know, if someone's going to read this document page by page, then you know they're going to take hours to read through it. So it's just you know, a comment as to, you know, get your feedback really.
Absolutely, Chair, and it's always a balance between making sure that members of committees have got access to the information that we're using to reach the conclusions that we put in the reports. If the committee were comfortable, what we could do is produce Annex A as we would ordinarily do, and I think that's about 14 or 15 pages. And then I can ask colleagues to publish Appendix or Annex B on the Council's website, but we'll just provide a hyperlink for members. We'll put it in the background papers rather than the body of the report, so it makes it clear that there isn't an expectation to go through the detail. But should members want to do a little bit more detailed reading around a particular risk, they've still got access to all of the information that I have in reaching those conclusions, if committee were minded to try that and see how that went.
Yeah, you know, I was, again, thanks for that. I was going to suggest it as a background paper. So, you know, I think that would allow members to actually focus in on the matters which are slipped, rather than having to wade through everything else where everything appears to be hunky-dory. So thank you for that. If there are no other comments or a result in that, you'll see the recommendations. Note Q2 position of the corporate risk, April 22 to July 22. I think that's what it should be, outlined in the report. Recommend Cabinet reframing of the reshaping risk to financial fragility risk on register, and refer any other comments to Cabinet for their consideration and endorsement at the meeting for Cabinet to consider the corporate risk register for Q2. I don't know whether you refer it back to say that we want these reports sort of just slightly varied in its format. So that's that. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Someone prepared to second? Thank you, Matthew. Anyone against? No, that's carried unanimously. Thank you for that. There are no any other items decided as urgent under part 1. If we go then to part 2 of the agenda, the public and press may be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items in accordance with section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Someone prepared to second? Thank you, Matthew. It's to exclude the public from this meeting. Sorry, Gareth, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Chair. If I could just give you the heads up that when we stop the recording and we stop the broadcasting, and then members can see the debate in private, so I'll just make contact with my colleague to end the broadcast. Just bear with me one moment, please.
No, that's okay. Obviously, we just need to move the resolution first to make sure everyone's happy with that, and then we can go into a private session.